Yep.
We're live now, Roger.
We're now live. Thank you,
We are.
Ali. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is just afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Leeds Region Enterprise Partnership Board meeting today on the 3rd of September. And I hope everybody's had some chance of some sort of summer break, however that has been, and we're all as fit, healthy as we can be. I've had a number of apologies, and there are some substitutions. Heather Featherstone sent her apologies. Other than that, I'm expecting all of the private sector colleagues to be on the call, the meeting today. Councillor Blake has sent her apologies, and Councillor Lewis is deputised, so welcome, James. Councillor Jeffrey is unable to attend, and neither is her sub. Councillor Shabir Pandor has sent his apologies, and Councillor Matt Bride is here, so welcome, Peter McBride, and also welcome to Peter Muckler, who's our senior Whitehall sponsor. It's great to have you on the call, and I know you need to leave by about 2 o'clock, Peter. And on the subject of timing, whilst this meeting, which has got 2 parts to it, is scheduled for 3 hours, my intent, selfishly, because I'm due on another meeting at 2, but we'll join late at 2:30, is to bring matters to a conclusion before 2:30, but we're trying to do that without necessarily stifling. As I mentioned, it's a 2-part meeting. Firstly will be our annual meeting business, which is held over from our last meeting, which we will go through hopefully fairly rapidly, but importantly to make sure that we continue to meet the high bar that we've set as being the most transparent LEP nationally. And then the second part is obviously business and related matters as set out in the agenda. Having dealt with the apologies of absence, can I just check if anybody needs to register any particular declarations of interest in any of the agenda items that we wouldn't already note? If so, perhaps you could raise a hand, come off mute and share them, and I'll pause momentarily, and on the basis that I don't see any raised hands or people coming off mute, then I'll assume that no further elections are made. Ruth.
Can I just mention Joanna Robinson has also sent her apologies this morning, Roger?
She has.
Okay.
Yes, I admitted that. Yeah, yes, she has. And I also just wanted to check. I should have checked that Mark is actually feeling a bit better because he wasn't so well the other day. I hope he is. He obviously is. Maybe
Thank you, Roger. I'm fine and fighting.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see that. So, can I just check formally? Are there any declarations of interest that anybody else wishes to make additional to those we already know about? I'm not seeing anything, and I'm not hearing anything, so I'll take that as read. I'm not aware that we need to exclude the press and the public, so everything's going to be held in camera, so to speak. Can I quickly move to the minutes of our last meeting, which was held in a similar way, remotely on the 14th of July, and just check that people can that they record our debate discussion and our decisions, and then seek by show of hands, thumbs, or otherwise, your approval of those minutes. Are we happy to approve? It appears that we are. Fine. So let's move quickly into the annual meeting business, and forgive me, if I'll come to certain people, and I hope I haven't got the order right. I think we're firstly going to deal with updating the LEP governance arrangements, about new panel members and other things, just to get the board's approval. I think I'm going to go to you, Caroline, for this. Caroline Allen.
That's correct. Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you've alluded to, of course, our annual meeting didn't take place in June this year due to COVID. But this year we did look comprehensively in February, at the February meeting, at the governance arrangements for the LEP board. And so it's not that long ago that actually this was looked at comprehensively. However, it is important for us to ensure that we maintain our high standards and our current excellent rating through the annual conversation in terms of governance. And so we've taken in these first few papers some of the key issues for the continued confirmation, I suppose, by the LEP Board, and also in terms of transparency and accountability to the wider public to demonstrate our current governance arrangements. So this first paper, item 5 here, does a couple of things. It sets out within the body of the report what the proposed governance arrangements are, i.e. no change since February for the remainder of this year, including membership of the LEP Board. And it seeks confirmation from the LEP Board for those. And they're set out in the, as I say, the body of the report in appendices 1 and 2. And Appendix 3 provides the annual summary of remuneration and expenses, which of course we publish on an annual basis. So that is there for the receipt and noting by the board. And then finally, Chair, this report actually proposes some additional nominations to the Inclusive Growth panel and the place panel in terms of LEP Board members, and they are set out at recommendation 8.1(3). So I'll pause there, Chair. Hopefully that's self-explanatory within the body of the report.
Are we happy to endorse those additional changes beyond where we were in February? A simple show of hands or otherwise would be helpful. Clearly we are, and I think you probably want to just do one other item, don't you, Caroline?
I do, Chair, yes.
Confirmation of in relation to something else.
Thank you, Chair. There's one matter which isn't contained in the papers because it has arisen since the papers were published. But the Secretary of State for International Trade has approached the LEP Chair to join a senior group of experts focused on advising on the investment chapters of the free trade agreements in terms of setting up a DIT trade advisory group for investment. So the board is asked to endorse, I suppose I should say that the LEP Chair is minded to accept that appointment, and the board is asked to endorse the LEP Chair's appointment as a member of the DIT Trade Advisory Group for Investment. So I put that to the board.
Thank you for that support. It's particularly pleasing that we've been invited to join, because it's about thinking about the UK's approach to inward investment, and I guess we've made something of a focus of that amongst other things over the last few years. So thank you for your support. And indeed, the meeting I'm going to go to after this one is the first one of that grouping. So thank you for that support. I think we're going to move now into the annual accountability report, Caroline. Is that something you're expecting me to do? Because I think it was, or was it you're going to do it? Just remind me.
Chair, I can do that if that's more straightforward. As it says, it's an annual report that we bring before this board. As the report sets out, there are a number of means for complaints, concerns to be raised. As set out there, 2.1. There's a range of different avenues for those. I'm pleased to say that again this year I'm able to confirm that we have received no formal complaints under any of these processes or policies in terms of LEP Board members. The second part of the report, again as part of our transparency arrangements, we publish every year those grant applications where there are, I suppose, grant applications where there is some relationship between the applicant and a LEP Board or panel member. As it sets out there at 2.5, we have introduced a policy and protocol around this to put in place a fair and transparent process if that scenario arises. I think we're probably quite unique across the country in terms of doing that and putting in place those additional measures. But as part of that process, we publish, and it's Appendix 1 to this report, those grants where applications have gone through that additional sign-off process. So again, Chair, this is a report for members' information, importantly for that wider transparency, and the recommendations are for the LEP board to note both of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So hopefully we can note those subject to any questions. And I'll just pause there. There's no need for questions, but just in case there were any questions. And before we move to the next item, I just want to give my thanks to board colleagues that our unblemished record in terms of, since records began, our unblemished record of absence of complaints or otherwise continues. So thank you for that. And it's, I guess it exemplifies the quality of this board, and long may it continue. Moving to agenda item 7, which is the annual scrutiny report, and I think I'm coming to you, Angela, for this item. Angela.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully, again, this is self-explanatory. Again, it is another part of the transparency of the operations of the LEP board, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee does undertake a work programme each year that takes into account work under both the LEP Purview and Combined Authority. So this is the annual report of the work done in the year. On page 31, there's a useful summary of their work plan, and particular relevance, I think, for this board is the work that's been undertaken in relation to apprenticeships and the local industrial strategy. There was a further piece of work underway on business grants, which was close to concluding, but was stopped due to COVID. So the committee is hoping to conclude that piece of work in the coming year. We will continue to update you via the regular corporate performance report on the work of scrutiny, but this for your noting and
Thank you, Angela. So we can note this report, please. And again, I'll pause, see if there's any questions or comments anybody wants to make. I'm sure it's self-explanatory. Thank you, Angela. We're now moving to agenda item 8, which is the annual report, the Equality and Diversity Policy and Statement. And before I ask Kate Hainsworth to contribute, I also want to make sure the board is happy to confirm that Kate remains as our diversity champion for the next year. And I'm just checking for a quick thumbs up that people are content with that. Yes, lots of thumbs up. So you've got a vote of confidence there, Kate. It's very important, this, to all of us, because I think even more so heightened by what we've experienced, ensuring that our policies towards economic growth are driven towards how to tackle some of the inequalities in our society. And there'll always be more work to be done, but it's better to get on with it rather than just keep defining and describing the problem. And it's particularly helpful to have somebody with Kate and her day-to-day work, not only as our diversity champion, but leading on this. So perhaps, Kate, I can pass to you for the comments you wish to make in relation to this item, and obviously to get the board's approval of the recommendations in para 8. Kate. I think you're on mute, Kate.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me. My internet has also been playing up, so apologies if I disappear. But thank you very much, and thank you for that vote of confidence in our ability to work together around this really, really important area for our city region in particular. I'm very honoured to be able to work on this with you. What I've welcomed has been working very initial stages with the executive on thinking through some of the implications of this, and many thanks to Julie for scribing this paper. It's been a very busy time recently, as I think everybody knows, but I hope the paper itself is relatively self-explanatory as to how we've got to where we are. And I think what's really important, apart from approving this point so that we can move forward with it, is I hope what we're about to do is take a very long, hard look at ourselves, our own operation. And clearly that does start with looking at a bit of an audit as to how we match up. I think that's particularly, I'm sure I speak for everybody when the whole wider equality and diversity work that the LEP has done, but also other colleagues around the city region have done in the light of experiences because of COVID-19 and the medical outcomes that has brought about for people, you know, particularly for diverse folk, but also in terms of the Black Lives Matters issue, and in terms of the work that we're all trying to do to ensure that there is real equity of opportunity and true inclusion across our geography. And so it's very important work. It's exciting that we're working on it together. I think there's more that we can do in terms of demonstrating how far we're keen to go, and so I highly recommend this as a starting point. I'm very much looking forward, I hope, to having a bit of time on the agenda in the future where we can look at this in a bit more detail, but that's not for today. So yes, recommend points 8.1, which is obviously just noting this, and then in terms of the statement, again, this is about where we are right now. I'm very much hoping that we can consult widely and ensure that this fast-moving area, in this fast-moving area, we as a LEP can be at the front, if not ahead of the game. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate, and on behalf of the board, thank you for all of your work since you joined us, but also prior to. I think it is important that, and I say this probably too often, but it's important that we just don't see economic growth as the prize. The prize is using that growth to eradicate, strong word, but to as near as much eradicate poverty, disadvantage, and deprivation. I see that Amir has just. Do you want to come in, Amir, with your question about some KPIs, because that might be just useful just to add to that before I just check that everybody's happy with the recommendations. Amir, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Yeah, I thought it was really good, and I think the focus on diversity and inclusion is really important. It just feels to me like it's such a broad issue, and there's so many different aspects to it that when we try to get one sort of multifaceted policy or approach to try and address various different things, each one of them is quite different. And I just sort of feel that, you know, the approach that we would take to sort of deal with race equality to what we would with sexuality equality or gender equality may well be very different. And I just wanted to understand better how that was going to happen and how we actually have sort of some sort of deliverables or KPIs that will allow us to understand that is indeed happening in those various different areas.
So I was going to bring you back in, Kate, and then perhaps bring Alan Rees in thereafter. Yeah,
great. So clearly I need to coordinate much more with the team, and probably Alan will articulate that better than I can. But certainly my hope is that what we will be starting with is from a point of view of looking at where we are currently. And that's not about naming and shaming or being embarrassing or anything like that. It's simply about honestly reflecting where we are currently in terms of our work around diversity and equity and inclusion. And I've had the advantage of working with a national initiative on this, and what's been so helpful has been that very honest audit, and that's precisely the kind of question that we then need to tease out and explore, Amir, is around what do we actually mean by diversity? How precisely are we going to work in those separate areas with those separate needs and separate issues? And it's that kind of granularity that we really need to look at. It's not something that you can encompass with a simple statement, but actually in terms of the work that I'm anticipating us being able to do together, it is around making a much more detailed response to the things that you've just asked.
And before I bring Simon Pringle in and perhaps get a response from Amir and bring Alan in thereafter, I think you make a good point, Amir, about having something of not a dashboard, but some indicators to say we've moved the dial on positively. Living, average salaries, absence of fuel poverty, or whatever. And I think those are things that perhaps officers have been considering. So I'm going to bring in Simon, if I may, and then Alan, and then I'll come back to you, Amir, just to close this item out. Simon, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the both the paper and the comments there, Kate. I mean, really very positive indeed. And so, mine is a reflection, really, that the agenda I'm leading on across the Green Economy Panel and the decarbonisation pathways, and the leadership that you're bringing, I think we're approaching a point of true convergence there, where we're seeing inclusivity, just transition, inclusive growth and decarbonisation pathways. Those various roads are meeting at the same junction right now, and there'll be a very short update from me later in terms of what we're doing practically around decarbonisation, but pretty much the next step is to make it a much more inclusive process that's reflective of the different types of social impact, experience and sort of economic consequence that people across the region in every capacity will experience or can contribute to. So it's not just to welcome the paper, it's also to suggest that we find some time in the diary to to really stitch those areas of thinking together and make sure that we build as much momentum as we can to that combined net positive outcome.
Thank you, Simon. Just before I bring you in, Alan, Shirley, I think, wanted to add a comment. Shirley, I think you're on mute still.
Oh, sorry, Roger. It was really just a comment about the ambition. I liked what you said about let's eradicate poverty, let's eradicate attainment gaps. And I think to do that, we need to be doing more than is indicated in the statement. I think we've really got to be seeking out and leveraging and supporting our diversity. And I think we should be a bit more ambitious, well, a lot more ambitious.
Thank you for that challenge, which certainly individually I'm happy to take on board, but we collectively need to do it. Alan, do you want to comment before I just check with Amir that he doesn't want to add any further and then move on with the agenda? Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. So I think all the points really well made, and just reflecting on what Shirley says, the paper does clearly indicate that we know we need to do a lot more in this space. I think there are three points I would make. The first is that we need a better understanding of the data and evidence, and to ensure that the way in which we are setting our kind of KPIs, monitoring and performance of our various programs are geared towards measuring the impact on inequalities, and some of that comes through the indicator set which we're developing for the strategic economic framework, which is later on the agenda. The second thing is that we need to gear more of our policies, programs and services more explicitly towards tackling inequality, which I don't think, which we've done some of in the past, but we haven't done it as much as we could do. And I think it's crucial that in the early kind of design phase of policies and programs that we're really engaging with communities and groups who hitherto perhaps haven't accessed our programs as much, so that they are designed with that in mind, and then setting ourselves our performance standards accordingly. The third thing which is worth saying is that we have some work to do as an employer. So so I am now the diversity champion for the senior leadership team, although obviously Ben, as the managing director, takes a very keen leadership role in this as well. We have set in train some work internally, setting up staff network groups for diverse groups, which those people within the organisation are leading work in this space with a view to us introducing more in the way of the ultimate aim being a more diverse workforce within the organisation at all levels. So we're looking at, for instance, how we can increase progression opportunities, how we can reduce unconscious bias that may exist, how we can attract a wider pool, more diverse pool of applicants to roles within the organisation, so that increasingly we can better reflect the population that we're serving.
Thank you, Alan. Amir, did you want to say anything before, in the interest of time, I move the agenda on?
Just very quickly, I mean, all of that's really encouraging, and just the fact that this is here and we're pushing this whole agenda is really encouraging. I think ultimately it's going to come down to what happens on the ground, and I think that, you know, what happens in terms of the communities. And I think it's no secret that, you know, there's a lot of people that are struggling and are going to be struggling a lot more. And I'm personally getting a lot of questions around, well, you've been on the LEP for 2 years. What are they doing for Asian businesses? What has been happening in this area? What's been happening in that? You know, there's certainly, I think, a lot more sort of questioning as people finding their own situations much more squeezed. And I think that we've really got to be in a situation where we're able to demonstrate that it isn't just the board and the staff and the internal, that it does go beyond that. And those are all really, really, really welcome. But it actually does affect what happens on the ground. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's that important point. We talk about social inclusion. Well, what we actually mean is we want to eradicate exclusion. So that's kind of why I approach it that way. But anyway, let's move on. Thank you for that, Kate. I'm just checking. Quick thumbs up that people are happy with the recommendations in the report that Kate just shared. Yep, thank you for that.
Just before you move on, Chair, sorry, and I know we've got a lot to cover, so I don't want to take long. It is simply to welcome the challenge from Shirley hugely. I'm with you. I think we've got a long way to go. But also, Simon, thank you so much for reaching out. And actually, that's part of what I'd like to do in the next quarter, is actually reach out to all of the panel chairs and leads to see where there are ways that we can actually integrate this work into your day-to-day business. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And so we will move on. Welcome, Cully. Thank you for joining. I know you were a few minutes late, but no worries. We're going to move to the annual review, and Ben's going to give some headlines from it. But I wanted to just set the context, whilst that's an annual review of what we've been up to. We are now in the final year of the Local Growth Fund, and almost the 6th anniversary of the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund. And it's important that we reflect on what we have achieved over that whole period. And we will be bringing later on to this board some impact assessment of what has actually happened, because that helps inform the things we need to do going forward, particularly with the evolution and further rounds of funding, as well as some of the gaps that have re-emerged that we thought we closed or otherwise as a result of what we've all been through since the early part of this year. So perhaps, Ben, I can hand to you, and then we will move fairly smoothly into the question time element of this annual meeting. So Ben.
Thanks, Roger. The annual review is a government requirement of LEPs, but is also a useful kind of annual statement that looks back over the last year of LEP activity and then looks forward to the objectives and the plans for the coming year. The document is not attached to this item on the agenda, but it's attached as a later item, item 15, Annex 3. I probably don't want to say very much about it at all. I think Roger's given a useful overview. I guess the points I would draw out are that it presents the outcome of the work that we did over the course of last year and the year before around strengthening LEPs. So it presents the LEP as it now is and as it will be going forwards as a result of the strengthening LEPs work that many of you contributed towards. It's in terms of the 1920 achievements, it's easy to kind of dismiss them as being pre-COVID, and of course the world was a bit different then. But it is useful to kind of keep in focus that the LEP yourselves as board members were active in supporting over 3,000 businesses across the city region. in the context of the last conversation about inclusive growth, supporting over 8,500 young people raise their career aspirations through the enterprise programs, as well as helping support and create over 1.2 thousand jobs through TNI and other activities. So the LEP is having a material impact on the ground. And although we don't talk as much about it through the delivery programs, it's an organisation, we're an organisation that has a kind of annual running budget of nearly £130 million a year. So a lot's been achieved, and the report summarises those things. It then looks forward over the activities of the coming year, and as you would expect, they're very much dominated by the response to the pandemic, but importantly, keeping that response focused on furthering the objectives around productivity, inclusive growth, climate change, and energy, and 21st century transport. So we very much welcome any comments that you've got on the draft reports that's in the papers under that item, and that can either be now or perhaps more appropriately, happy to take written comments and other discussions about it later. But I'll stop there, Roger. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments anybody wants to make to Ben, either now or, as he said, he's invited you to do so offline? If so, perhaps you could indicate, and I'll bring people in. I'm not seeing any, am I, Ruth? I don't think so. And I think it is important that whilst we look at annual slices retrospectively and forward, that we actually stand back. It is 6 years since we developed the strategic economic plan for the region, and we'll be talking about the strategic economic framework later on in this agenda. And we set out some aspirations, and we have deployed public and private sector money, at least in the ratio 1 to 4, to at least double economically the outcome for the region, and we need that impact assessment just to say, what can we learn from it? Where can we pat ourselves on the back, and where can we also challenge ourselves that actually we need to go greater and further, and particularly back to Kate's item about that ultimate prize of everybody feeling there's something in it for them rather than just for others, so to speak. So I think we'll move on with your agreement to the final part of our annual meeting, which is the opportunity, as we would have done if we could have met in person, to allow the public to ask questions. We have sought and invited members of the public and businesses to put questions to the LEP board, either through your voice engagement website or using hashtag #AskTheLEP. And I'd like everybody who's going to be commenting or responding to questions, I'd like to just thank them for taking part. We discussed them yesterday, and we decided there were a few we could deal with in the time available, and we will do that shortly, and I'll be handing to Ben to deal with that. But all the questions we've received from public and businesses will receive written answers, which we'll post on the website by the end of this month, I think was the plan. Alan, I'm just looking to see if he nods. I haven't committed him to something he hadn't agreed to. So perhaps over to you, Ben, and we'll go through these questions fairly quickly. But if colleagues feel they want to come in and add something to it, please indicate, and I'll do my best to include you. So Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Roger. So, as you say, we've had a number of questions that we've packaged up into half a dozen or so. So I'll read the question out, and I'll then ask relevant members of the board to lead a response to those. So the first question is as follows. As the question goes, I'm a sixth form teacher. As a sixth form teacher, I not only have my own economic interests in mind, but those of my students as well. How much can I reassure them that the current economic situation in Yorkshire is robust enough to withstand the potential dual threats of a post-Brexit and a post-COVID Britain, and what plans are there to secure against either or both of these threats? So an easy question to start with, and I think, Roger, I'm going to ask you to lead the response on that one.
Yeah, I thought I might have to do that. I think the first thing I'd like to say, and I'm recognising this is streaming live, is that despite all of the challenges that we face, we can't adopt and shouldn't adopt, not only for ourselves but for generations to come, that we're all doomed. Yes, there's difficulties, there's challenges, but I do personally believe that all of our efforts today and the efforts that are going on in terms of economic recovery planning, etc., both locally at the northern level as well as nationally, there's reasons to have, I think, realistic optimism about the future. I touched on the fact that we have been deploying public money at least in the ratio £1 from the taxpayer matched by 4 from the private sector to double the economic impact. 1 + 4 = 10. And I would remind people, colleagues on the board, maybe new or long-standing, and those maybe listening into us, that over the last 6 years, we have deployed in excess of £1 billion of public money on a wide range of economic, transport, and social areas. And just a few headlines for our area, which in economic terms is a microcosm of the UK. It's one of the most diverse economies in the whole UK, and we know about our strengths, but actually they're very wide-ranging, and we're actually pretty resilient. But that resilience has been tested to almost its limit in the last few months. A few headlines of all of our activities: we've deployed nearly £80 million of public money in creating state-of-the-art or certainly refurb facilities in the FE sector right across the city region. We've invested money in innovation and incubation space, and there's more to be done there. We've supported through the grant programme of some £49 million, 15,000 businesses to grow and to scale up and be more productive, supported in excess of 3,000 apprenticeships, and importantly, not only created but also safeguarded in excess of 30,000 jobs during the period. But there's still, and I think importantly, and I take, if I may, not self-congratulate, but take a degree of personal pride that we have moved the dial on in terms of inward investment, and the fact that we are recognised not only nationally but internationally in a way that we weren't a number of years ago, and that bodes well, I think, for the future beyond Brexit and COVID, that people, as we're hearing, still want to come to our part of the world and invest, whether from within the UK or overseas. And I think, if I remember rightly, we've got 6 or more very, very exciting items that we're working on by way of inward investment that will produce extraordinary job opportunities for those sixth form students that the questioner references. But that's set against the background of the job losses that we're going to incur, the challenge to our economy. And that's why it's important that the recovery plan focuses on our strengths, makes the case to government about the offer we make to the nation in terms of economic opportunities, rather than just a shopping list of, can we have the money for this, that, and the other. Actually, it adds up to something fairly significant, a £1.4 billion ask in total to rescue, reimagine, and put in resilience to our economy, in return for which we would deliver something of the order of 8 billion of economic uplift. So not a bad prize for the taxpayer. I'd want to just reference, before I close my response to this, the fact that we have been embarked on a program with MIT about how we transform the business economy of the city region into much more of an innovation-driven entrepreneurial economy, whereby we can actually get not just a step change in or a gradient shift in economic growth, but actually something of a hockey stick. I won't go into the detail of that now because time is short, but we are now moving to implementation phase, and I'm delighted that one of the programs that we launched in response to COVID-19 for people who sadly maybe found themselves out of a job but had an idea and wondered, how could I find whether this is something we could turn into a business, that the LEP program, which was only launched a few weeks ago, and Andrew Wright may know better, but it's probably had already several hundred inquiries, and that's encouraging to me that there's actually that entrepreneurial spirit is out there, as exemplified by many, if not all, of the board members of this LEP board. So I'd like to reassure the questioner and his students that we're not complacent, but we are confident, and there are reasons to be optimistic, and that we will, through common purpose and common endeavour, we will continue to prevail on behalf of all of those communities. And back to one of our early items, eradication of poverty and deprivation being the real prize. Thank you, Ben. I think that's probably enough from me.
Thank you, Roger. So let me move on to the next topic, and there's two questions that both relate to each other, and I'm going to ask Rashik and Simon Pringle to address these. The first is, what is the LEP doing to strengthen skills in the region in the post-COVID economy? And the second is, how is the LEP helping people who have been made redundant through the pandemic learn the skills needed for so-called green jobs, so that we can create a future-proof economy within the region? And that's for Simon. So Rashik and Simon, can I ask you to respond to those, please?
Sure, thanks, Ben. And firstly, thanks for the question. I think these are great questions, and I think they're top of mind for many people in the region. The economic recovery plan that we've laid out really sets out the longer term planning for the recovery, and obviously skills and employment is a big part of that whole plan. Skills has always been the way in which you start to make progress. We've seen that through the years. And it's no different now. It's just the skills that we're learning is different. So things like the employment brokerage for young people through the employment hub helps us find new pathways, enterprise skills, the work that we're doing in creating that adult employment offer, retraining offer, upskilling is great. So things like the Reboot program being very popular and really helps us move forward there. Now, of course, as a region, we don't have all the levers we need to be able to drive all the activities that we'd like at the pace that we'd like. And so the Future Skills Commission, Future Ready Skills Commission has been running and starting to define what are the levers that we need, how would we go and drive that, what kind of powers do we need, what kind of capabilities do we need, how do we need to have greater control of that. Now, that report is due to publish very soon. And it was delayed a little bit because of the whole COVID-19 situation. But that lays out a number of very powerful programs that I think will make a big difference. And finally, from the kind of employment hub perspective, that program really offers local support. So it's there to help individuals prepare the CV, helping with the job application, helping find opportunities, providing that reskilling. And it brings together the spectrum of great capability we've got in the region through the FE colleges, the universities, and the range of training providers that we have in the region. And along with the Reboot program mentioned earlier, it really is a complement to the whole program. Now, part of this, of course, is we have very vibrant industries, and so there is still plenty of opportunity out there. It's how do we get the citizens, the people who are trying to get to those jobs, be able to shift into those roles and get there as quickly as possible, so that we get the recovery moving to support the region's ambitions. Does that make sense, Ben? I think that covers the topics.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rashik. Simon, did you want to come in on the green jobs part to the skills questions?
Yeah, but very much so. And thanks, Rashik. And I think probably where I'd start is to say that, in many instances, jobs in the green economy are just jobs, and there's a huge opportunity for transferable skills to move across, huge opportunity for people who have found themselves in industries that are being digitized out of existence or decarbonized out, to actually take the core skills they've got and reapply them in a different direction. And so fundamentally, a lot of this is about our economic strategy that we were talking about before, and really creating the conditions for innovation, for inward investment, and bringing forward the types of industries that we want to see, and we want to allow the regional economy to benefit from going forwards. I think to that, I'd also sort of make reference to in fact, oftentimes through these LEP meetings, we give the impression that there are panels operate in silos, and that's increasingly not the case. So Rashik and I, just to take an immediate example, have been working for some time now trying to knit together what does it mean for a green economy strategy, and what does it mean from a skills strategy, and how do those things work together. So those sort of collaborative areas of activity are really very important, and I think the person who posed the question should be reassured to know that there will be more coming forwards in that respect going forwards. Now, in terms of some specifics on that, in terms of green jobs, so not just going to a completely sort of big picture answer, the economic recovery plan, and Ben, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it includes a £10 million proposal for towards net zero carbon skills programme, and that's going to support the referred to as the low carbon pipeline, including the just transition work that I referred to earlier, and the wider plans to tackle the climate emergency. I mean, it's a relatively modest amount of money on one level, but it will get us off on a decent foot in the right direction. And also a workforce fund pilot, which more broadly is looking to address skills gaps that have been identified locally, and allowing us to work with employers to recruit hard to fill vacancies and target specialist STEM skills. There's some potential there to allow that to fund better engagement between employers and training providers, building capacity and capability to co-deliver training, which will obviously pick up some of these green jobs. And we know that within that, some of more, you might call them anchor institutions, some of our big utility companies and others are really working within their own areas of influence to collaborate in that sort of space. And the other benefit from that pot of money is to look at a retrain approach to different types of skilled jobs if that transition is required. And of course, from my perspective, the big picture here is that transition across to a net zero economy, more green jobs, is that we end up with a much more competitive economy. We end up with more jobs because of the nature of that economy, and we know that decarbonised sectors tend to outcompete those that are heavily carbon intensive. We know that investment into green or clean growth tends to yield more jobs and opportunities than that which doesn't. So I think for our economy as a whole, some of the models suggest that might be a net positive 70,000 jobs uplift, which comes from the overall decarbonisation approach that we're seeking to adopt. Again, to use a previous comment, not complacent but confident. We've got some points of intervention, we've got some collaboration, and we're able to also galvanise the efforts of those large institutions that happen to be vested within our region as well to try and knit this together into something that will be positively impactful. I hope that's a reasonable answer to your question there.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Rashik. I think that covers it really well. There's definitely a theme to this year's questions, unsurprisingly, around COVID and the economic recovery from it. And the next question bears that out. So this question is one that we'd like Councillor Hinchliffe to address if she would, which is, how does the LEP plan to support the region's recovery from COVID-19, and how will it ensure that the economy is more resilient for the future?
Thank you. So first of all, there's a lot of people in this room been working on West Yorkshire economic recovery over the last few months, and I want to thank them for all the work and time they've put into that. We have a draft West Yorkshire economic recovery plan, and it's something we made sure we started when we were right in the middle of the crisis, actually, not just waiting for it to end. And I do think we've been ahead of the game in our thinking on this, probably ahead of the game of government as well in many ways. So the Economic Recovery Board met just this morning, in fact, and the draft plan came to the Combined Authority last week before the Combined Authority meeting, and obviously Roger Marsh, as chair of the LEP, and the 5 leaders of West Yorkshire have sent that draft to Rishi Sunak, Treasury, HM Treasury, to feed into the spending review, because obviously what that West Yorkshire Economic Recovery Board has suggested is a range of interventions that can be made from a targeted point of view, going to several different areas on skills, enterprise, totally £1.4 billion, and that includes 4 distinctive investment propositions, which total £750 million. So it's quite big ticket items, but there again, this is the biggest economic downturn we've ever known in our lifetimes, in the last 100 years or more. So I'm afraid great interventions are required for very deep economic downturns, recession. So we have to be bold, and government have to be bold in the investment they put into this. So there's a few propositions that we're leading on, building on the region's world-leading position as a health innovation place. We've got several big teaching hospitals. We've got lots of medtech jobs in the region. 22% of medtech jobs in the whole country are based in this region. And also we've got Born in Bradford, for example, this Act Early Institute. So there's all sorts of going on in this region, and we need to invest more in that, and that will generate more jobs and more R&D and investment and innovation. Secondly, digital. We talked a lot about this in LEP Board as well. Maximise our capabilities as the fastest growing centre in the UK for digital. It's not just the sector itself, but digital actually is useful for any industry. Thirdly, about net zero carbon, and Simon's already referred to that, of course. We always talk about it as reducing in carbon emissions, but of course there are also fantastic job opportunities in net zero carbon as well. All the retrofitting that needs to be done to houses, changing boilers, etc. All that leads to more jobs in the economy, and we need to make sure we're in a good position to achieve those jobs for the region. And then the fourth one was capitalising on our reputation as a great place to do business, and having programmes for support for entrepreneurs. We're good at enterprise. We set up a lot of businesses. We just need to make sure they survive, and we support those to prosper. I think just adding on to that, Chair, I'd just like to add, leaders in particular are very keen to see culture featuring as a big part of the economic recovery plan, and therefore there's another iteration of the plan coming together, which will have a 5th proposition around culture, which is being drafted at the moment. Culture for all our places is hugely significant. From the Peace Hall in Halifax, Chair, which I know you're particularly fond of, to Production Park in Wakefield, all those make a fantastic offer for the region in terms of culture and investment as well. Businesses want to invest somewhere where their customers and staff are going to be happy to live, and that's got a great reputation, and culture is very much part of that. So we have a lot of plans. We do need significant funding, and as government has heard from us say many times, but I just want to reassure the questioner that we are on with planning economic recovery, and we'll do everything we can both in the short and long term to affect that.
Thank you, Susan. You're absolutely right about that, quality of place, that quality of life. It's not just about eradicating the negatives, but it's also improving that quality. And I think, it's worthwhile sharing, if I may, Ben, for board members and those listening, that the offer we make to UK PLC is to enhance the economy of Leeds City Region by in excess of 8 billion in return for an ask of 1.4. And I'd like people to just hold that as a headline. It's not we're just asking to stand still. We're asking to move further forward, as we have been doing over the last few years. Anyway, thank you for that, Susan. Ben.
Thank you. So the next question moves on from looking at things at the level of the city region through to the distribution within the city region. And the question that I'm going to ask Andrew Wright to address is, please explain how city region growth is helped by hoovering up jobs from, e.g. HMRC, into Leeds city centre, rather than investing in, e.g. Shipley. So a question that's concerned with government relocation and the distribution of employment and plays into the inclusive growth discussion that we've had earlier. Andrew, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So I think the first point to address is that the decision that's referred to in the question, it wasn't a LEP decision. That's a HMG government decision. And where the LEP gets involved in these kind of questions really is to make the region as attractive as it possibly can be, to get as many jobs into the region as we possibly can. And all the other answers that we've just been hearing, and indeed this whole meeting, is really dedicated to making it clear to anybody who's listening and people who should hear just how very attractive this region is. And clearly, getting more jobs out of London into regions is a thing that is being discussed very widely at the moment. Building back better, and we think, I think, in the Leeds City region that we've got a real chance to benefit from that. It is one of the locations which government is thinking about for putting more jobs out to, and indeed officers from the LEP are engaging with Whitehall and officials to make sure that our offering there is completely clear and attractive, and I'd be reasonably optimistic that we should do well from that, and that there's a bigger opportunity than it was, isn't it, as well, because it isn't just office jobs that we're talking about now. I think there's a much wider understanding that through all the remote working that we're all doing, as we're exemplifying just this afternoon, where an actual job is located can be much more flexibly thought about. And that should be and is a massive advantage for a region like this, where people can live in very attractive places and in very attractive communities with very good culture around them and all the benefits that we've been talking about. Perhaps the last point to say is that also in the city region, we are concerned with making sure that new opportunity is shared out evenly and fairly around the region. It isn't just a Leeds City story. And to that end, we do set ourselves objectives and measure ourselves. Every report for the Business Support Service, for example, measures how we're getting on in the different parts of the region through the different communities that make up the whole city region. So, it's clear and can be seen by anybody who wants to look how much we do work to make sure that the access to these opportunities is as fair as it can be. Okay, Ben?
Thank you, Andrew.
Can I just come in, Ben, if I may say? Yeah. I think just to perhaps highlight one of the points you just made, Andrew. The range of talents and diversity in economic, gender, ethnicity, and what have you of this board, should be an example to and hopefully reassurance that we want to do the very best for every place, not just certain places, and there will be situations where decisions are made by others that have an impact on the one hand. On the other hand, we need to be ready to counteract some of those, and whilst we'll talk about it later in the agenda, the Getting Building Fund allocation will enable some significant projects in Bradford, in Kirklees, in Leeds and others to be pushed forward, and those are projects we will have ultimate control over the investment in, and that's an important point. So Ben, I think we're moving to the last question before we get into part two of the meeting.
Yes, we are. This is the last question, and I'm going to ask Mark Roberts if he'll take this. So it's a question specific to Wakefield, and the question goes: as a Wakefield resident, how has the LEP helped to secure investment and development in the city, and what are the future plans for Wakefield?
Thanks, Ben. Obviously, as you say, it is a question about Wakefield, and so I'll answer it speaking about the initiatives very much focused on Wakefield. But of course, all of the different initiatives that I am going to talk about run right across our region. And I think, when I was sort of thinking about this question, it really serves to showcase some of the very practical impacts that, we've delivered as a LEP. So I guess firstly to support businesses in Wakefield, in the last 12 months, the LEP have approved 77 business grants. Those grants, so the money invested to businesses, have a value of just over £1 million, 1.12 million. And those Wakefield businesses that have received those grants have contributed just over £7 million as well. So to Roger's ratio earlier, that's £1 of public money is getting £7 of private money into those projects. And in total, that's leading to over 170 new jobs for those Wakefield businesses. In terms of supporting sort of commercial zones, we've got an enterprise zones program, which is investing in 2 sites in Wakefield, and the South Kirby Business Park and also the Langthwaite Business Park extension. And that's making space for extra commercial units to hopefully attract new businesses and help existing businesses expand. And then there's the Getting Building Fund, and Wakefield will benefit from nearly £2 million of funding from that. And that includes funding for the Wakefield Warm Homes Fund, the Business Gigabit Voucher Scheme, and the Nottingham Skills Businesses and Services Hub. And then I guess the last bit is around transport, and there's a few sections on that. So there's the Transforming Cities Fund, which has got over £30 million worth of funding for projects in Wakefield, including a big, nearly £14 million sustainable package for Wakefield City Centre. And there's the West Yorkshire Transport Fund. Already, we've delivered 5 projects totaling about £50 million, which includes a big chunk of £37 million for the Wakefield Eastern Relief Road. And then there's 6 more transport improvement projects that are in process for a total of just over 20 million. And then, picking up the points on sustainability and sort of active travel, there's a City Cycle City ambition grant where there's 3 million going to the Castlefield to Wakefield Greenway, which will help with those active travel initiatives. So a very sort of Wakefield focused answer, but I really wanted to draw out the fact that this really highlights these different projects that are going right across our city region. So I hope that answers.
Thank you, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ben, for being in question master, and to all our other colleagues for their very full answers. An important thank you to those listening and those who submitted questions. We are continue with our intent to be the most transparent LEP in the land. And certainly for as long as I'm chair, we will not demur from that approach. And as I said at the outset, full answers to all questions received from the public and businesses will be on the website by the end of this month. So thank you for all your contributions. We're now going to move in. It's headed up as other business, but it's actually business beyond the annual meeting. But I'm going to basically bring the annual meeting and the aspects to it to a close formally, and now move into agenda item 11. And I know we'll have covered some of these things in some of the conversation we've had in 11 and 12. So perhaps presenters of those two perhaps may reflect on what we have covered in the interests of focus. So perhaps if I need, I think I'm not sure I'm going straight to you, Alan, sorry, to you, and then to Patrick, or we're going straight to Patrick, but I'll pause there, Alan, to let you introduce the next item.
Oh, we can go straight to Patrick on this one, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, that's fine. Patrick, I'm sure I've seen you there. I hope you're there somewhere. Please take us through economic reporting, the latest update.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, thank you. Yes, building on the board report and the board cover paper, to pick up some of the key points. We reported in the board report that the national COVID infection rate had increased in early August, and most of you are obviously aware. Since then, a number of areas, including Bradford, Kirklees, and Calderdale, have been placed into local restrictions. Since then, that situation has improved quite significantly, with the rates falling, particularly in Bradford and Calderdale, and despite rates rising in Leeds and Wakefield over the last couple of weeks, those rates have actually stabilised. So I think the local situation is a lot better in that respect. Although it is worth noting that all the West Yorkshire local authority areas are in the top 20 English league table for local authority rates per 100,000. Reflecting on where we are with some of the labour market information, just to reflect on the current situation in terms of what we know about the jobs market. We report in the board report that the number of people claiming out of work benefits increased by 3% in West Yorkshire, In the month to July, there are now 108,500 registered claimants in West Yorkshire, a rate of increase of 96% in the month to July. Since then, obviously, we continue to monitor the labour market, and we're monitoring on a daily basis the pattern of vacancies. And it's fair to say that the current trend in vacancies at the moment has certainly plateaued in West Yorkshire, particularly stagnant in a couple of areas. From what we know about the number of people claiming on out of work benefits and the number of vacancies, we think there are around about 7 people for every vacancy that's currently available in the economy. Also worth noting as well, as we touched on in the board economic report, that as you probably all are very much aware, the second quarter GDP for the UK fell by a record 20.4% in Q2. That's on top of 2.2% contraction in activity in Q1. There are particular industries that are hard hit within that. So, for instance, construction has been quite badly hit with a 35% contraction in its output in the second quarter. I think the key thing from that as well, is captured in the board economic report, is the bounce back in output in the last month of that quarter, which is June, where output grew by 8.7%, admittedly from a low base. In terms of our ongoing engagement with businesses through the growth services, we're obviously continuing to talk to a range of businesses, through the growth service. And I think one of the key things that's coming out through those sort of anecdotal sort of interactions is that the majority of businesses continue to indicate that they are operating below capacity. So it's just under 50% of businesses continue to indicate that they are operating below capacity, though that picture does vary quite substantially. In terms of what we know about wider grant take-up, we've produced a range of information which allows us to look at the take-up of the range of grants the government have released. And we do know from that analysis that parts of sort of Bradford, for instance, take up of the grants from the government has been particularly high, and it probably reflects demand in those areas. I think more generally, I think if we look at what we know from more up-to-date information that's been released by HMRC in terms of the furlough scheme, which includes the month up to mid-July. We now know there are around about 320 jobs that are furloughed in West Yorkshire. This represents a 16,000 increase on the previous month. That's around 31% of all jobs, which is very similar to the national figure of around 32%. There is a distinct sectoral pattern to that furloughing. So particularly, for instance, the accommodation and food services sector, where 80% of eligible jobs in the sector are still furloughed in West Yorkshire, and 77% of jobs in food and drink services. So those are quite substantial numbers. But there is quite that does vary quite significantly by sector. So, for instance, manufacturing and construction, for instance, those figures are quite different, where you're probably looking at around about less than 20% of the workforce in those sectors are still furloughed. What we know from other information produced by the Office of National Statistics is that they believe that the rate of people working furloughed is falling quite substantially. They now estimate it to be around about 13%, having fallen from its crisis peak of around about 35%. But interestingly, the ONS survey from which this information comes does clearly indicate there's still a very high proportion of people still working at home. That's around about 39% of people are working at home or working remotely, and that figure has actually remained remarkably stable over the last 3 or 4 months. In terms of what we also know about sort of our understanding of the wider transport system, we do know that we are seeing the public transport system recovering. Weekend travel is recovering much more quickly than weekday travel, and bus use is recovering much more quickly than rail travel. There's more detail in the board economic report. We do know that MCAR, that in terms of who's using the bus, that we are seeing more concessionary, so people with concessionary M cards, for instance, are travelling much more frequently on the bus system than younger people. Younger people are slower to return to the public transport system than we've previously seen. We do know that demand for public transport is actually picking up, and so it's an improving situation, admittedly from a low base. So I think that's more generally just a sort of a general update on where we are in terms of the economy and the transport system. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Alan, did you want to add anything before I perhaps just open it for any comments or questions from colleagues? No, Alan. Okay. Anybody want to
no, Chair,
any questions or comments before I thank Patrick for that? No. Okay. Thank you very much, Patrick. Obviously, there are some significant challenges out there, but we have our plans and strategies and plans, I should say, in the right order to combat that and move forward and end up better as a consequence, I hope. So I think we're going to move on, Brian Archer, to just updating people and seeking this board's endorsement of the economic recovery plan as it's iterated to date. I think that's what we're going to do here. So Brian, over to you.
Okay, the COVID report split into 4 sections: business support, skills, transport, and organisational. So what I'll do is I'll just pull out some of the salient points under each of those headings. On business support, we're still seeing very strong demand from businesses for help. The business advice line volumes are up over 60%, and access to finance is still a quite significant challenge for our businesses in the region. Having said that, over 500 million in grants has gone out to 37,000 businesses across the Leeds City region in a very short space of time. We continue to lobby banks because obviously banks have been overwhelmed with high demand and they've had their own logistical issues and challenges to deal with. So there are still some significant challenges with regards to access to finance. But grants are only part of the solution and loans are only part of the solution. The other activity we've been involved in as part of the COVID recovery is driving up the skills, capacity and capability within the businesses that we're supporting. So we've extended the business mentor scheme. We managed to secure another 1.3 million to provide specialist consultancy to businesses, and also build on the volunteer mentor scheme that we launched at the start of the pandemic, which has been really valued by a lot of the businesses, particularly some of the peer group learning that came out of that. So they're the main headlines on business support. With regard to skills, yesterday the government launched the Kickstart scheme, which is a work placement scheme where the government pays 50% of the placement salary costs for a period of 6 months. And it's aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds. The maximum a firm could get with regards to subsidy is £6,500. And the employers get a £1,500 incentive payment. Now, we've already started engaging businesses with a view to lining up placements, and we've formed a small working group to look at how that's going to operate locally so that we're actually on the front foot. And we'll be working with the chambers and the FSB and other intermediaries to make sure that businesses are getting access to that support. There's potentially an issue with regards to displacement and apprenticeship starts. We had some feedback earlier today from an FE college saying that an employer had turned around and said, actually, we're not going to have an apprenticeship start. We're going to put somebody on Kickstart instead. So again, we need to just think through some of the issues and challenges and take that up with DWP colleagues. The furlough scheme is tapering down. Government contribution drops by 10% each month. It'll end in October. As Patrick said, in this region, we've got 320,000 people currently on furlough. And I mentioned Kickstart. We've got around 26,000 young people in the region that would be eligible for that support. So it does very much feel like this is the calm before the storm in terms of, you know, the huge volumes of people that are going to be entering the labour market. We've also refreshed our product portfolio. We're looking at massively increasing the number of business startups, around 20,000 business startups. And we'll be putting a refreshed product portfolio on the website to share with our partners and intermediaries. On transport, we secured 1.9 million from DFE to support school transport, and I understand buses are now back to 30% of normal levels. So some positive news on that, but obviously town centre businesses have been significantly affected by you know, the big drop in footfall. At an organisational level, we've got around 400 people working remotely at the moment. We have also made a facility available at the Exchange office for up to 40 desks, so members of staff can book a desk for a day, as long as obviously they maintain social distancing. But the vast majority of the workforce are currently working from home, and that seems to be improving productivity, given the results of the recent staff satisfaction survey. So some positive feedback from staff about that. I'm happy to take questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? And I'm going to be a bit more diligent in my show of hands, and hopefully those who put them in the chat that I missed, Patrick will address. So just looking and scanning. I don't think I'm missing anybody. Ruth, am I? And Julie's there. Important point, I think we want, and it's come out in the answers to some of the public questions that have been put, is about the economic recovery plan, and that offer to enhance our economy by 8.5 billion in return for an ask of a 1.4 across a range of things. I guess what I'd like the board to do is to endorse where we've got to, subject of course the point that both Councillor Hinchcliffe and Cully have raised regarding the cultural and other aspects that we want to develop as a further additional proposition to the four that we've already got. So can I take it perhaps by a thumbs up, wave the hands that people are happy to endorse as a board where we've got to in terms of the economic recovery plan? And I would commend, if you haven't had a chance to read, not particularly the letter to the Chancellor that the 5 leaders and I were co-signed, but actually the high level summary, because that gives you the real overview of where we are in our economic recovery thinking under the 3 themes of rescue, reimagining and resilience. So I think we will move on. Thank you, Brian, for that. And we're going to move into the panel and committee reports. There are only 2 reports because of the timing of this board meeting and the timing of panel meetings. And I'm going to move straight to the place panel update. And I think, Tim Swift, you're going to perhaps make some comments over and above the paper that's there. And then we'll just see if there's any questions anybody wants to raise. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Roger. Sorry for the slight delay in turning my microphone back on. So I think the most important piece of work that's summarised in there for place from the chair's update is the work that's being done on the place narrative, which is trying to tell a story rather than having a dry a dry strategic framework about how the different parts of the region works together and how our ambitions for economic growth tie in with the demands for housing growth, the changing transport response to climate change, and so on. We've had a couple of really good sessions on that with a lot of different contributions. I encourage people to have a look at that and also feed in their ideas and comments. I think the second piece of work I just flag up because it feels particularly relevant in the current climate is the the work that's being funded through One Public Estate, looking at a feasibility study about temporary uses of space in towns, particularly in town centres. That's initially looking at public sector owned buildings, but clearly with the rapid changes that our town and city centres are like to be faced, I think again there could be some wider lessons and interest to learn from that. We also had an update on the emissions pathway work, but clearly that's something that's more owned by the Green Panel. I think perhaps just the final thing to mention is the flood risk work as well, which again, this is obviously something particularly dear to my heart from Calderdale, but looking at the flood pipeline of work across the LEP area. And again, emphasising this isn't just about putting in place higher walls, but is much more about approaches that look at managing water differently and how we can improve natural flood management, the use of uplands and so on.
Thank you, Tim. Before inviting any questions or comments from the board, Simon Pringle, I know we aren't scheduled to get a GEP update, but is there anything you wanted to add in this space, particularly as you made the point about the panels all working together rather than operating in separate silos? Perhaps you may want to come in now.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yes. So at the last board meeting, there was a request for sort of a general update in terms of what the climate emergency meant and what it meant contextually for the city region and how those sorts of things link together. So whilst my panel hasn't sat since that board meeting, I can just confirm that session was held. It was well attended. It was approximately a week ago, and we went through a number of big picture and then more specific and contextualised agendas, and many of those present were on that meeting. The big ask from that was that the various panel chairs would really start to explore the way in which they could own elements of the response to the climate emergency. And one of the recurring themes at our last LEP board meeting and also during that session was that this has to be a team effort. So what Councillor Swift's just been talking about, absolutely pertinent to that, the interplay between the blue-green infrastructure strategy that I chaired in a previous existence, a number of the Green Economy Panel agendas and that which relates to place, absolutely perfect interplay. Also the conversation earlier with Kate, that really sort of resonates in terms of the way that we need to mobilise community and the arts and various other parts of our society that are not necessarily fully engaged at this present point. So it's good to have the opportunity to reinforce that. And if any panel chairs present want to have offline conversations about how they may gain further insight or translate their activities into a way that helps us address the climate emergency, that would be great. And in terms of practical actions that are happening now, the most immediate is that next week we are running a sequence of sector-specific workshops to look at the way in which we can translate our LEP commitments and our aspirations into practical action with transport, land, property, and power and industry. So again, those are open workshops. If people want to participate and haven't received invitations, just get directly in touch with myself, and we'll make sure that you're there. But those are the things that are happening or have just very recently happened, and it's that call for active collaboration and action at this current point is the big message from me.
Thank you, Simon. So, and thank you, Councillor Swift. And any questions or comments from colleagues? Okay, so happy to note that report. What I was going to say also, and we're going to move on to the capital programme, and Ben, I think, will introduce it. And we're also going to get a quick update from Andrew Wright on where we are at MIT. What I thought as time was slightly ahead of the schedule, what I thought, recognising we'll have been on a call for an hour and a half since midday, immediately prior to the agenda item 14, I might just suggest a quick 5-minute break if people want to go and get a quick cup of tea or whatever. I thought might be helpful, but if you could perhaps do it quickly, because don't know about you, but we seem to go through the day these days not having cups of tea or having sandwiches delivered to you, and then all of the other necessities of life, as well as keeping awake for long periods. So I suggest we're going to do that here in a moment. So Ben, would you like to introduce, and I think Lynn's going to go through some of the detail, the kind of capital programme update, and particularly just touch on the Getting Building Fund allocation, which we recently secured.
Okay, well, thank you, Roger. So I'll just say a few words of introduction, then Lynn can field any challenging questions. The paper does three things really. It sets out from Investment Committee the Getting Building Fund and the schemes that have been approved by government into that £52.6 billion fund for LEP board members. And that's a significant addition to the programme for the coming year. The second thing it does is it updates where we are on the revisions to the assurance framework. You'll be aware that all of the LEPS projects are run through the LEPS assurance framework, and we review that annually. We're also reviewing that in the context of devolution to bring it into a position where it's compatible with the role of the mayor going forwards as well. So, and we're doing quite a bit of consultation with partners and other users of the assurance framework to look at how we can approve it above and beyond government requirements. That's the second element. And then the third element provides an update on progress against the growth deal, which you'll be familiar with. I guess two things to say on that. The first is that you'll be aware that we had an element of funding withheld by government pending a review in the context of deliverability. Lynn might choose to give some details, but in essence, we've been given a clean bill of health, and that funding is now being provided to us. And we also are asked by government for you to approve the endorse rather the LEP the growth deal dashboard, so that's included in the paper for your approval. I'll stop there, Chair. I don't know whether Lynn, you wanted to make any further comments.
Just a couple. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Lynn Cooper. I'm the portfolio lead in the Portfolio Management Office. I was just going to say that we've got some really good news within this paper. Obviously, there's the Getting Building Fund, the growth deal, the payment of the final 36 million for this year, which was outstanding, and for the whole of the growth deal, that's the last money. But just also to mention that Q1 is on track in accordance with what we reported in the review that went in June, and also that the forecasts are still on track as well. In fact, some of them are slightly better than what we put in the review. So we're in a very good position at the moment. We'll keep an eye on that, and we have got mitigation in place in case there's any projects that do pull out, because there is still some risk within projects. And then the only other thing I was going to say, it's not mentioned in here, but the broadband contract with DEFRA has now been approved, has been signed, and we have a preferred contractor on that. So more fully at the next meeting, I'll put in about how broadband's doing, but it will now begin to start spending, which is very good news as well. That was it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I think just again for colleagues before opening up for any comments, just to put in some kind of context, the first round of our devolution arrangements will over 30 years provide 1.8 billion at the beginning, not the end. But to reflect on the last 6 years, Local Growth Fund, West Yorkshire Plus Transport, European Structural Investment Funds, and the deployment during the year of some TCF funding is that we together, the private and the public sector together, have enabled the investment of in excess of £1.2 billion worth of public money into our region, and I think we should take some pride in that across a wide range of projects. So any comments or questions from any of our colleagues on the line? I'm just looking to make sure I don't miss any hands. And there aren't any. And can I take it you're happy to endorse the dashboard that's annexed to the paper? which I've already signed, but it's useful to have your approval of it. Thank you for that. Now, Andrew Wright was just going to give us a quick heads up on where we are on MIT REAP. And as I said, I suggest we take a quick 5 or maybe 8-minute break to get a cup of tea and all those things before we move into the last 2 agenda items, of which they both have importance, but for different reasons. So Andrew Wright.
Yeah, so MIT REAP has been referred to a couple of times already today. The key development really since our last meeting is that 2 of the platforms, the key platforms that have been developed by the Leeds team have been launched and are engaging with the public now. And there's 2. The first one, which has been live for just over a month now, is called LEP, and that's the one that engages with innovation-driven entrepreneurs and gives support to people who've got big new ideas about how to do new big things. And as Roger said earlier, that has proven already very successful and is getting some good and very interesting engagement. And then the other one that went live 1st of September, so just in the last few days, is called Build. And that's the support platform for entrepreneurs who have got ideas about how they wish to go forward with perhaps more established business models that may be proven in other places but haven't been done here, and getting the support that they need to get those off the ground here. So if you haven't had a look at the LEAP and the Build websites, then I would encourage you to do that, and maybe even sign up to be part of the chat functionality that those sites have. Of course, it being COVID time, but I think we probably would have done it anyway. It is very friendly to the remote environment, and is basically a virtual platform in both cases, but very well executed and very sort of appealing to the eye, and is successfully bringing people in. So what's happening next, though, and I guess that's the point of having a little slot on this, is a number of people on this call did attend a information session, which was about engaging with the Leeds City Region stakeholders. If you are not on that and you feel that you'd like to know more about MIT REAP, then let me know. If you were on that call, then you already know basically what you need to about it. And the big effort between now and Christmas will be enlivening the engagement with the city region, those platforms having been created, and making sure that the stakeholders at district level and all the various people who are already doing things within the LEP that have some overlap with are fully bought in and synced up with this initiative. And I've been sitting on the panel for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and one of the things that I've been very happy to see is how well it's going to fit with our business support offering as a LEP. We've perhaps been a little bit light on support to entrepreneurs who haven't yet got a company, who are still thinking about what might be coming down the track or what they might be able to generate. And these 2 schemes that have been put together so well are really going to fill perhaps what was a bit of a gap there. So expect to be engaged with by the MIT REAP, and expect there to be an organisation created over the next few months, which will take the MIT initiative forward into the future through April 2021, which is when we're anticipating having the full organisational structure built. Okay, Roger?
Thank you, Andrew. And perhaps Julie could take away an action to make sure all of the members of the board have perhaps a note from me or Andrew about the links to the various MIT initiatives, so that people can have a look for themselves, and also to cross-reference to the current 4 propositions that we've put forward to government to kickstart the recovery, one of which is a £340 million ask in this whole space of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. So, we're looking for significant financial support to back the 2-year journey we've been on to encourage what MIT called IDE, innovation-driven enterprises. And that's why when you see some of the collateral, you'll see that we've come up with and trademarked IDEA, because that's what it is. It's all about taking ideas and making them globally significant businesses, born in Leeds City Region, resident here, but of global importance. So thank you, Andrew, and it's great to have you and Kirsten and others joining, and Shirley joining in the team as we expand out and embed it importantly everywhere, but also make sure we do embed it properly in the in Leeds and beyond as we roll it out over the next period in time. So any questions from anybody on MIT? Everybody's ready for a cup of tea or something else. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick 5-minute or maybe 7-minute break, and can we be back at 1:45 sharp, if not before? So we'll plow on through the rest of the agenda. So please stay online and go. Yes, Ruth.
Just, we're not sure how this will affect the link to YouTube taking a break in the meeting. We think we'll be able to rejoin YouTube, but it's just if any members...
Can we not just stay live for a few minutes while people...
We can stay live if everybody wants to turn the cameras off and the microphones off, and then the screen's blank, and then we'll just restart as you suggested.
Yeah, I think it's just...
1:45.
I think it's just that's a long haul to be sat since midday.
It's fine.
At this time of year. So you will let's go all on mute and cameras off and nip and get a cup of tea or whatever, and then
rejoin at 13:45.
Yeah, if not before.
Okay.
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 quite interesting watching how people return at what. Who was returning first? Are we all right, Ruth?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Everybody's gone and got chocolate, haven't we?
No.
I have. It's really helpful for my diabetes.
I'm on almonds, Roger.
Almonds, yeah, okay. Well,
that's all I could find. There's no biscuits. Desperate.
That's the sort of stuff people do in North Yorkshire, isn't it, really?
Quinoa and almonds.
We're more hardy in West Yorkshire. It's, you know, old-fashioned toffee crisp will do.
Licorice all sorts for me.
Ah, well, we won't go into that, Caroline. But anyway. It actually is an interesting aspect, isn't it, as everybody rejoins. The fact that we do these meetings and they're all one into another, of how to actually give some space for people to do the things they would normally do if they sat in an office or whatever. And have a wander off.
Very grateful for that, Roger. Mine was a Jaffa cake. I don't know if that trumps anyone, but.
Well, I've got toffee crisp, but I'm not sure it trumps it. But it's still got chocolate, which is obviously a good thing. But
I'm not Garibaldi.
Actually, Garibaldi's right. Anyway, let's not get too mob happy. We've still got some particularly important items to cover, and I know as people are rejoining, Pete, I know you've got to go at 2, and I was conscious that you may or may not want to comment or reflect. You don't need to, obviously, but a comment or otherwise on the meeting so far or any other aspects. And I should have mentioned that up front, but didn't do so. But if you did want to, when everybody's rejoined, and I think they are now rejoining, aren't they, Ruth? If you wanted to, that would be a good time.
Not particularly. Roger's it's been really interesting to see, and particularly the public-facing side of it, and how you've done that, and that's been really interesting to see. But yeah, recognise this is there's quite a lot of, if you like, annual business here. I did find the diversity and equality item and debate really interesting, because we have the same debates within Department for Education I do within the apprenticeship programme about where to put the emphasis on equality and diversity, because it has to be embedded, but you want to do specific things that make a difference. It's identifying those specific things that make a difference that is sometimes the key challenge.
Okay, well, I also thought, Peter, we should forward you a copy of the letter that's gone into the Chancellor, so you at least again are privy to our thinking and these propositions that Councillor Hinchcliffe and I and others have referenced, and also for our next meeting, Ruth and Julie, if Peter felt he wanted, particularly as we might be sort of either post or around budget, CSR, etc., you may want to have a 5 or 10 minute slot. I'll leave that open to then. But if you did, we'd very much welcome your input.
I'd love to have an item of Councillor Hinchcliffe on skills, and of course we might have devolution announcements of some description at some point, as well as spending ones. So and potentially ones on FE and skills. So yeah, important time coming up.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Peter, and we'll say bye in advance, because I know you're going to have to climb off, but it's great that you've continued to support us and give us your time and attend our discussions. I'm now moving to agenda item 14, strategic economic framework, which replaces, or we've slowly transitioned what was the strategic plan of some and then refreshed in 2016. And I think, Alan, you're going to lead on this, and I'm going to hand to you straight away, Alan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Really happy to introduce this item. So, as you've said, since 2016, the Strategic Economic Plan has been the document which set out the organisations' priorities for growth and development. And earlier on, you talked about some of the successes that have come from that. The Strategic Economic Framework is an evolution of that plan, and it reflects the growing range of areas that the LEP and the Combined Authority operates in, and is designed to reflect the changing national, local, regional, political and economic circumstances, and the need to incorporate future commitments in our work. So the idea is that it doesn't stand still, and it moves with the times. The plan is that this forms the new overarching economic strategy for the region. It sets out the vision for the region and our priorities and policies for achieving it. We've tried to take a new approach with this work, so to allow for greater flexibility and that ability to change and adapt it, as I was describing. It's not a single published document, but brings together our various existing plans and strategies to form an overall strategy. It includes existing policies at the moment, but will include future ones as well. And it's hosted on a public-facing website. So rather than being a kind of linear document, it's a website that enables you to dive into particular areas and probe and get more detail on the things that the reader is interested in. Policies can be in changing circumstances without having to amend or withdraw the whole thing. At the moment, it only contains policies and strategies that have previously been adopted, but what we've also done is collate the detail on our vision and priorities, presenting the CA and LEP's positions in a new way. There are no new policies being presented for adoption today. They'll be brought to future meetings. This is more about adopting the overall concept. There are 5 sections to it: vision, priorities, policies and strategies, partnerships, and monitoring and impact. And we've talked already today a bit about the importance of ensuring that we have good performance measures, monitoring measures in place for our various, for all the work that we're doing. And all of that material as it exists is available online. We've not put all of it in detail in the pack, instead providing you with examples of some of the pages. So the vision document, which is attached at the first Appendix 1, sets out where we want to be against where we are now, and also the journey that we've been on so far. It sets out the successes of recent history, the significant strengths that we have in the region, including diversity, but then also the challenges that we're facing. Based on those challenges, that then leads us to 5 priorities around boosting productivity, enabling inclusive growth, delivering 21st century transport, tackling the climate emergency, and securing money and powers. And there is a page that sets out for each of those priorities what we are doing and how we're measuring. The policies and strategies that we bring forward to the LEP and CA are then built on a common evidence base and are driving towards the same outcomes. The framework then has, sitting underneath it, all our existing policies and plans, and this is where we'll put new things as well. So that includes bus, business support, connectivity, culture, digital, employment and skills, flooding, and so on and so on. And examples of those are attached as well. It's the housing, heritage, and regeneration one that we've attached. Then there's a monitoring framework which sets out the key metrics against each of the key priorities. And once those are agreed, the intention is to build a dashboard of indicators and to report on those regularly and to publish the information publicly. Once this is all adopted, the plan will be to review it formally every 6 months, but what we'll also do is ensure that it is updated policy positions as agreed by the LEP and the Combined Authority, and future reports on policies will indicate where a change to the Strategic Economic Framework is necessary, so that it is kept up to date and that those changes are appropriately approved. Any new policies or strategies that come through, of course, would come to the LEP or the CA following consideration by the appropriate advisory panel. And the other key thing to mention about this, and this comes up in the agenda item in a couple of it's in a couple of agenda items time, the single investment fund. So the Strategic Economic Framework will help to inform the investment strategy for the single investment fund going forward. So the ask of the LEP is to note that the Strategic Economic Plan will continue to be used for growth deal programs until that ends in March 2021. endorse the concept and content of the CEF and provide any comments, and then note the intention for future policies, strategies and changes to the CEF to be brought to the LEP and advisory panels for consideration as appropriate. Really happy to take any questions, and my colleague Emma Longbottom, who is the mastermind behind all this, is also available. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome, Emma. I think also, just to reinforce the point Alan made, as with the strategic economic plan, when initially conceived and when the CA was created in 2014, that plan, whilst developed by the LEP in partnership, private public sector together, it was then subsequently endorsed by the Combined Authority. So we had one version of the truth, and there was one plan. And the intention, subject to your agreement today as a LEP board endorsing this approach, is that tomorrow this approach will be formally adopted by the CA, subject obviously to that discussion at that Combined Authority meeting tomorrow. So is there anything you wanted to add, Emma, before I open up questions, seeing as you are
just
the person
a couple
that's
of
mastermind all this and put a lot of
not know masterminded,
anything you wanted to add?
Just a couple of points, thank you, Chair. We did a lot.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on. Alan mentioned around the prioritisation piece for the single investment fund, which is really important, and it's something that we really want to build on the CEF to become, so that we can actually use that to prioritise future investment. But that also links into the assurance framework, which Ben mentioned earlier on. So we're really trying to fit that jigsaw puzzle together of the assurance framework, the single investment fund, and the CEF, to really knit those things together, so we can really show a very strong prioritisation and show how things go through that process, so that everything is very streamlined and works together. The other thing I thought would be useful to mention is the local industrial strategy, you'll notice, is part of the strategic economic framework. Now, obviously, as a board, you spent a lot of time helping us shape that last year. We did pause that work earlier on in the year due to COVID and not knowing what was happening at a national level. We are now picking that back up and starting to look at what we need the local industrial strategy to do for us as a region now. So we have the economic recovery plan, which has taken forward some of the priorities that we discussed as part of the local industrial strategy. So we're now looking at what we need it to do and how that will fit into the CEF. So we'll bring something back at a later date, but I just know that this board was very much a part of that development work, so I didn't want that to get lost.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So any comments or questions from any colleagues? And perhaps if you could raise your hand. There are some comments going on the chat bar. Thank you, Shirley, for yours. I think there was one immediately prior. I think it was Rashid immediately prior to that. Are there anybody else want to say anything? Any comments before hopefully getting the thumbs up on the endorsement that I'm seeking on behalf of the whole board? Okay. It looks, thank you, Kate, for the comment. So perhaps with a show of thumbs up, I can just record that we've got the board's endorsement for this, and I can reference it with the CA tomorrow. Okay. Cully, you've just asked a question there. Let me just hear. As far as I'm concerned, in relation to the Rishi Sunak letter, that would be fine. But I think we better just check, Ben, that obviously I'm only a co-signatory, not the sole signatory to that letter. Perhaps we'll pick that up offline if we could, Cully, in relation to the letter to the Chancellor. So thank you, Alan, and thank you, Emma, and particularly you, Emma, for all of the. I know you've done a lot of work in this, and it only seems like yesterday we were chatting about this, but I guess some weeks and indeed months have gone by. And it is a fantastic iteration. And the important point, it provides that flexibility, that framework flexibility as we move into and then beyond a mayoral combined authority.
Roger,
yes, Ben.
Can I just make the link back to the earlier conversation about equality and diversity? in terms of the link that Alan made into the programmes. So within this pack of stuff for the CEF are the plans for indicators, and I think those are things we want to look at again in the context of the earlier conversation.
Yeah, a very good point, Ben. Thank you for that. And going back to that earlier point, Cully, I had forgotten that it's on the public website. So yes, it's fine. Okay, shall we move on to corporate performance? And I think this talks about some of our headline achievements. And I think, Angela, this is you for the last one of our formal agenda. And I just want to make a couple of remarks about agenda item 16, and maybe Councillor Hinchcliffe might want to too, before we'll bring the meeting to a close. Angela.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is your regular corporate performance report, giving you an update on a range of corporate matters. They're very brilliant. I'll just go through briefly a couple of points on each one, and then happy to take any questions at the end. So an update on revenue budget, which has been a particularly challenging year this year. We set the budget. There's clearly COVID having a huge impact on it, and at the moment we are still working through particularly the impact on public transport part of the budget, with the schools going back and the additional funding we've been given to help support that. So further work underway as we understand the scale of the gap this year and what we need to put in place for next year. The statutory accounts have been completed for last year. They've been audited. We're waiting a couple of final assurances from the auditors. They will be signed off later next month. The corporate plan under item 2.6, a reminder that you saw a LEP annual delivery plan for this year back in April. We have had to review that in the light of COVID, and that's been refocused, obviously, to pick up on the activities linked to the COVID-19 recovery. This was referenced earlier on in the meeting, and you've got here Appendix 3, the revised version of the plan. If you have any comments or would like to see anything added to that, please do let us know. It will be subject to a sort of a tidying up and design process after any further comments and approvals today. I think just to note that it is a requirement that we have a separate LEP annual delivery plan, but it's clearly closely aligned with the Combined Authority's corporate plan, and we're monitoring a set of KPIs that come out of both of those documents. They are attached, progress on those is attached to Appendix 4. You will note that some of the indicators are currently showing amber and red, and that is a reflection of some of the delays we've had due to COVID and the need to recalibrate and refocus efforts in some other areas. And finally on this, I think the corporate risk update, we have been through the corporate risk register. Combined Authority have approved some changes to that as well, particularly recognising the strategic risks relating to COVID, which are now better reflected in our risk register. A couple of final comments there in internal audit and overview and scrutiny, and with that, happy to take comments or questions on any part of the
Thank you. And there's also an ask in paragraph 2.4 on page 130 that in relation to the 2021 annual delivery plan, which there's an updated version in the appendix, that you delegate authority to me and to Ben to sign off the final plan. Any comments from anybody? Any questions of Angela or otherwise? Okay, and are you happy to delegate the authority to myself as chair of the LEP and Ben as the managing director to finalise the plan, the draft of which you see in Appendix 3? Sure, a thumbs up will be fine. Thank you. We've got the thumbs up. Okay. That concludes the two formal bits of the meeting, the annual meeting as well as the heading up other business. I just wanted to just touch on, and maybe say Councillor Hinchcliffe may also want to comment on, not in any particular detail, agenda item 16, which is there for information. And actually it was by way of thanks to all of you, particularly the colleagues from the private sector, but not exclusively so, for using your networks to encourage the residents of West Yorkshire to have their say as part of the consultation. And whilst some make pour cold water on the fact that out of a population of 2 million, we had 4,400 plus responses. It's actually 3 times, if I've got the fact right, stop me if I haven't, 3 times the level of responses of anywhere else in the country to date. Notably, West Midlands had 1,300. And the fact that there's overwhelming support for what we are all seeking to do in relation to devolution is really encouraging. I wanted to pay particular thanks to both Kate and Amir who got involved in some press releases on the consultation to make sure we got as wider audience participation in this, and on behalf of this board, thank you for that. I'll pause there before perhaps bringing the meeting to a close, just in case Susan might want to say something. I don't know whether you do.
No, just to add to your own comments, Chair. So the leaders were very keen to get as many people to respond as possible. Given COVID lockdown, we were concerned that the consultation could be effective, but as you say, it's been completely the opposite direction. We've had lots of people giving their views, and we're delighted at the response. So thank you to officers, and also thank you, as you say, to all those members of the LEP and Combined Authority who've helped reach out to the networks and make sure that we've got as many people as possible participating in this. It is going to benefit the whole region, so it's absolutely right that as many people as possible in the region have a say in what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So here we are, slightly ahead of my own even plan to get to 2:30, and we have covered a lot of ground. Can I, on behalf of the LEP Board, thank all of the officers and colleagues who have been involved in, again, enabling us to have a productive, collective and collaborative meeting virtually. Can I thank you personally for all of your continued support and challenge, which I relish, may not always appreciate it, but relish as chair, as I now enter, or not so much enter, I'm now moving through my eighth year as LEP chair, and if Tom Reardon's still on, he might remember that I said I'll give it 3 years and we'll see how we go, but there we are. And above all, hoping from me and mine that you all stay safe, and that when we meet again on the 17th of November, we might be able to do it rather more convivially in person, and vaccinated or otherwise, and continue this important agenda. I genuinely believe, despite the challenges, there are every reason for us to continue to portray, display and espouse realistic optimism. That's not complacency, it's about confidence of our importance to the nation, not just, and obviously importantly, to all of the people we are trying hard to improve the quality of lives for, both present and future. So can I wish you all well from not so sunny round here, but it's not raining, so that's always a good sign. And thank you for all of your participation, and hope to see you, not necessarily virtually. And I know Cameron and I are going to have fish and chips in Roundhay Park or something if we ever can find a time to do that. But see you all soon. And as I say, thanks as always.
Thank you, Roger.